everybody, and welcome to the Unlocking Behaviour Change podcast, the show all about psychology, and in this series, making decisions. And I'm joined by Professor Robert West. Hello.
Hello, Jamie.
Hello, Robert. How are you?
I'm very good. Lovely sunny day. Got a party tomorrow, if you remember. Are you coming?
I am coming to your 70th party, and it will be done by the time listeners actually hear this.
That's true.
It'll just be a happy memory.
Or a memory, anyway.
Hopefully. Yeah, a memory. I woke up this morning and my girlfriend was watching the Peter Gabriel's Secret World Live concert film.
Ooh.
And which is, for me, one of the greatest concert films of all time. And I just couldn't tear myself away from it. I practically, only to do this podcast, I had to tear myself away from the encore.
And is it on YouTube or?
It's on, we've got the Blu-ray.
Oh, the Blu-ray.
Super duper Blu-ray.
What, you mean that thing where you stick a disc in?
Exactly that thing.
And it goes round and round and round.
And it makes a little whirring noise.
Wow, blimey.
But actually, it looks better from a Blu-ray than it does just streaming for various technical reasons, which I ended up looking up and are far too boring to say here.
But I would like to borrow it from you at some point.
Oh, I'll send you a copy. It is super good. Okay, so we are talking about decision-making this season, and we've been working our way through the FACET Framework, FACET, and we've made our way through to the very end. So we've done framing, assessing, comparing, enacting, and today we're going to be focusing on time. I left a little pause there, so it's kind of time. That is how time feels.
It does, and now. And now, and now, and now. Now
and
is
tomorrow
the winter
and tomorrow.
Well, I was going to do the other one, which is now something. Sorry, that's a joke from Red Dwarf.
I'm making fun of Richard III. Actually, it's making fun of the character, isn't it? But anyway, so there's a lot to say on time, isn't it? So we've kind of talked about it a little bit because you can't help but talking about time when discussing decision-making. But where's the best place to start on this?
The best place to start is to say that the time factor permeates the whole thing. That's why in our graphical model, which you can see on Substack, if you subscribe to that, Unlocking Behaviour Change on Substack, we put the picture up, which is why it's like a clock with an alarm. It's actually an alarm clock. And the time part is a hand that can go round and round the face of the clock. So you've got face, as in clock face, and time. How cool is that? Anyway, it is cool and largely accidental. But time permeates everything. And
wait a minute, it wasn't accidental. I came up with that.
Oh, did you? All right. I don't want to. Oh, blimey, God.
I accidentally came up with an idea. Yeah, that can happen sometimes.
Yeah, but let's not. I hope you're not going to expect royalties.
No, but I am expecting a Nobel Prize, as I've said earlier.
You have, yeah. Well, they're quite easy to come by.
Yeah, it shouldn't be too difficult.
Yeah, so it permeates everything in the decision process. And what's very interesting, even going back into the 1970s when I started looking at this, was that most of the sort of decision-making models that are out there and very widely used don't have time in them at all. I have mentioned in a couple of episodes the subjective expected utility model, which doesn't mention time. There's the multi-attribute utility model, which doesn't mention time. And so there was a model.
And so just to recap quickly, those are the pros, cons analysis type ways of looking at decision making.
Exactly. So the subjective expected utility model is a model that looks to your expectations about the future, what might happen, what the likelihood is, and how much you like it or dislike it. The multi-attribute utility model is one which looks at the different features of the options you're looking at. You know, if it's a car, for example, the styling, the fuel economy, and so on. Don't look at time. But slight digression, a little bit of a digression, but when I was doing my PhD at UCL, the head of department there, Bob Audley, was very famously a proponent of a model that absolutely looked at time, which was called, it was a form of what they call random walk model. But that was used for choice decision making. So choice reaction time. So it kind of was a decision-making model, but in that very, very narrow time window of, is it an A or is it a B, or is the light on or is it off, or is it to the left or is it to the right? It is decision-making, but it's obviously your time is key here because you're trying to make a decision as quickly as possible. That was at that time, I think I'm right in saying that was pretty much the only widely used decision-making model that involved time. But of course, since then, we've come to realize how important time is in every facet of the decision.
So let's talk generally about how time works. I mean, I'm thinking that for most decisions in my life, I've got loads of time.
Actually, for most decisions in your life, you've got very little time. But let's say for the big ones, you might have a bit more time. I mean, let's take the sort of extremes, but still at the level of important decisions. Crossing the road. Okay, shall I cross the road? That's a decision. Ideally, it's a decision because, obviously some people walk out into the road without stopping and looking and thinking and deciding whether it's safe or not. But it's a decision that actually involves time in it in the process, but also it requires you to make a decision like that in a moment. And or if you're pulling out at a junction, these sort of everyday decisions that actually we make a lot, but every now and then they go wrong and you have, terrible accidents. So that, very short time scale, you've got to weigh up things very quickly. And if you think about it, what the brain is doing is processing complex information about vehicle trajectories and so on. One of the interesting things, by the way, about that is that when you're training a young child to stop and look both ways and decide whether it's safe to cross, which we should all do when we have young children, then very often the children, if they see a car anywhere in sight, they will they will say it's not safe to cross. They're making, because they haven't figured out yet, what the timings are, and they gradually learn. And then, of course, as time goes on, they learn better and better, and in some cases start to take some unacceptable risks, or in fact don't even treat it as a decision at all and get run over, which, as you know, Jamie, is an area of research that I spent some years looking into.
I thought you were going to say I got run over.
I don't think you've ever been run over, have you, Jamie?
I've not ever been run over. No. I'm quite a cautious road crosser.
You're a cautious road crosser and a cautious driver, which is always a good thing. People say, this driver, he's too cautious and too slow. There's literally no such thing as being too cautious. And there's no such thing, by the way, as a fast but safe driver. If you're a fast driver, you're an unsafe driver, just for this on the stats. So, you can forget that one. Anyway, going back to timing, at the other extreme, you may have a decision about your retirement. It may be something that you would literally take years over and formulate a view, come back to it, think, when shall I retire? Well, maybe not yet. And so a decision in terms of the time frame over which a decision can be made, it could be made from literally less than a second to all the way to many years. And also it can be made all in one go. You start the decision and you take it all the way through to the end before you do anything else. Or in many important decisions, we look at it for a bit, we go away, look at something else, look at it for a bit, look at something else. And the things that go on in the meantime can potentially impact on what the decision is that's ultimately made.
Well, you did mention earlier the random walk model, which we talk about in the book. That's kind of an interesting idea.
It is an interesting idea. I was a big fan of this model of decision-making, even as a model of not just choice reaction time, but actually a way of understanding how at least some part of our decision-making works and how time influences it. And the idea of the random walk model, and listeners can look it up in ChatGPT or Google, I think they'll find it very interesting, is that number of things. One is at the beginning, it's a process that takes place over time in which you move towards or away from each of your various options. Let's say you've got two options, and let's represent one of the options, option A, as a line that's sort of high up, and option B is a line that's low up, as low down. And let's say that the starting point for your decision would be somewhere near the middle. And then as with each tick of the clock, as it were, you gather information and you move towards one option or towards the other option. So you think, am I leaning towards option A or am I leaning towards option B? And the more you lean towards option A, of course, the further away, this is an important feature of the model, the further away you are from option B. And therefore, the more work that has to be done to move you back to option B. So it's saying your decision making is taking place in this sort of space. And that's with two options. Obviously, if there's more than two options, you have to think about 3-dimensional space, 4-dimensional space, et cetera, et cetera. But it's the basic idea is you have a starting point, and then with each bit of information that you gather, it takes you in the direction of one of the options and away often from other options until, and this is another point in the random walk model, until you reach some threshold. So you say, right, that's it, I've got enough information now, I'm going to go for option A, or time runs out, in which case you decide on whatever it was that was the closest option at the time when that happened. So there's one other thing I want to mention to sort of complete this picture, and that is you don't always start in the middle. That you might have a starting point that's very close to one of the options. You have a sort of initial bias, as it were, towards one of the options. And if that's the case, it could take very little information to tip you over the threshold. And you can think of that as a kind of confirmation bias, that if you're starting from a particular position, then you get a little bit of information that sort of favors that option. You go, right, that's it, I'm doing that. Whereas if you had started from a more neutral position, you would have required more information in order to get you to that decision point. And in fact, you may never have got there. One other thing, sorry, I did promise that the last one was the last thing, but this is the last thing. And that is, it's called a random walk decision model. So it's like walking like random. If you imagine an ant going along a path, it doesn't go in a straight line. It goes one way or another way in what looks like a sort of semi-random process. It's not completely random. But the point about the random element is that at each point in each bit of information that you gather has a sort of, let's call it a random element to it. It could drive you one way or it could drive you another way. And a whole bunch of random factors could determine on a sort of probability distribution which direction it's shoving you in. So you don't go steadily towards one option or another. You go, first of all, a bit in one direction, then a bit in another direction, then a bit in one direction. And so it is, like an ant walking down a path.
Okay, so if I was to put this in a kind of a real world scenario for me, this reminds me of when I'm making decisions about where I want to go on holiday. So already I have a slight bias towards going to France or Italy because those are two of my favorite countries. and I studied French and Italian at school, so maybe I have a little bit of more of a connection with them. I love the architecture of those places and the feel. So I already have a bias. If I'm thinking of going anywhere, immediately I'm already going, oh, I could go to France. And then where could I? Maybe Paris is accessible via London very easily. So, or there's other places I've been to before. So there is a kind of a bias to places you've been to before. And then I guess I could go and have a tennis lesson with my tennis coach. And then he says, oh, I've just been to Croatia. And I'll be like, oh, I've not been there. And all of a sudden that's throwing in something else into the mix. So I might suddenly randomly be like, oh, okay, maybe I'll start looking up that. Does that look viable for me? And then maybe I've got those 3 options in play. And then I'm sort of looking on Airbnb or booking.com or whatever, one of those websites. And I'm seeing how much does each thing cost? And that's pushing me in different directions. Oh, actually, Venice is going to be really expensive at this point, and Croatia looks cheap, but it's an unknown. So you're kind of moving around with each bit. And I'm discussing it with my girlfriend, and she says, oh, mate, we're pushing each other in different directions all the time.
Yeah. So it's a really neat way of encapsulating the way decisions unfold over time that you can apply to any of the other kind of decision frameworks, the non-temporal decision frameworks that we've been talking about, subjective expected utility or whatever, because what it does is instead of with those models, it assumes like everything's going on at the same time. With the random walk model, it's saying that actually these things extend over time, so that it recognizes the fact that we can, there's a limit to what we can pay attention to at any one time. There's a limit, obviously, to what the way information is presented to us, or which we can gather information over time. And then each time we do that, it's saying, right, that's reset our position in that sort of decision space. So you can think of the decision as a point moving in a decision space over time towards or away from the options as information comes in or as you think about information. Yeah.
So a bit earlier on in the conversation, you said that actually I don't have very much time in my day-to-day decisions in general. And that sort of surprised me, because I think, well, I'm, say, for example, going to the supermarket, don't I have all the time in the world to choose the best avocado? And don't I have all the time in the world to go up and down each aisle and pick what yogurt I want?
Well, you have enough time very often because these are simple decisions that don't matter very much. But you can't spend too long. You can imagine how annoying it would be for someone who was with you if going around the supermarket, you spent 5 minutes on every flipping decision about what avocado you were going to get. So most of our decisions are highly abbreviated, and that one of the factors there, of course, is that even with things where we actively make decisions, we very often start with a kind of rule-based system that I'll go for the first one that I see, or I will get avocados if they're grown in Spain or wherever. We already, before we get to the decision, have a lot of the ingredients of the decision put into place. We're not thinking about the decision right from scratch for a lot of these everyday decisions. So it kind of feels like you've got a lot of time, but actually you don't have much time. You just have enough time.
I suppose there's a kind of a pressure, internal pressure, even if you technically had more time at the shops, you're actually not going to spend forever doing. There's something in you going, oh no, I need to get on.
Yeah, so that's a very important distinction is between external and internal time pressures. I guess a thing that we need to get across is that there are always time pressures, whether they're external or internal, simply because you can't spend your whole life on one decision. And so, but having a good understanding of the nature of the external and internal time pressures is an incredibly important piece of wisdom in decision making. And they're not mutually exclusive. To give you an example of this, in exams, for example, a good exam technique is one in which you set yourself internal deadlines for the different components of the exam, for the different questions, so that by the end of the exam, you have ensured that you're going to get all the marks that you can, and you have enough time to check your answers. That's just classic good exam technique that is taught, which actually, many people don't apply, unfortunately, but would do a lot better if they did. So you've got an external time pressure, but you've got internal time pressures, which you put on yourself in order to achieve your goals within that constraint.
And with exams, I remember how much I was taught to reread the exam question more than once, and how difficult that is. And I didn't always manage it, I don't think, even though, they say, highlight the keywords. And I think I did end up doing that. But I know that there was a huge sort of panic in an exam, that pressure, just thinking, right, read the question, now go. Okay, your brain kind of goes into this slightly frenzied panic mode.
Yeah.
And so you might want to take more time over something than feels comfortable.
That's a really good point. Very often, time pressures are imposed on us, or we think they are, to a greater extent than they are. And obviously, this is one of the classic ploys that's used in marketing is hurry, 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 offer ends soon kind of thing. It's amazing how often the offer doesn't seem to end quite as soon as they thought, but or as they were portraying. But so yes, this is part of the wisdom, isn't it? It's how to manage time in your decision making, when to slow down and when to speed up. It's an important feature. And it's not necessarily that complicated, but it requires you to pay attention to it. I think that's the very first thing, is for decision makers to be aware right from the get-go, in what way do I need to manage time in this decision?
And in high stress situations, the brain has what you might call a high cognitive load. There's a lot going on, and it's very difficult to see clearly. So is that a case where preparation is key, where rehearsing beforehand is key, sort of practicing?
Oh, this is absolutely crucial. You see this, I know I make a lot of reference to aviation because there's so many pieces of wisdom that come out of aviation and what has been learned in the aviation industry to make it so safe. And one of the things is that you will have times during a flight where you have a high cognitive load, as it's called. There's a lot going on for you to think about. And what you do as a pilot is to use whatever time you've got when there's not much going on in the middle of a flight, for example, to brief yourself and the crew on what you're going to do in these situations, including how you're going to handle unexpected events, emergencies. There's a YouTube channel called, I think it's Missionary Pilot, of a guy who flies in Papua New Guinea, and it's really interesting. I mean, it's definitely worth a watch if you're interested in decision making, because he takes you through on each flight the processes, including the pre-flight checklist and the preparation and the landing checklist and so on, and the preparation that he does, which includes, for example, before he starts the takeoff roll, he goes through the pre-takeoff checklist, which includes what's going to happen, what he will do if there's an engine failure at a critical moment. At what point would he abort the takeoff? Okay, when the speed gets to 40 or whatever. And what happens if there's an engine failure immediately after takeoff? And he says it out loud. And he has a little set of switches which he uses, dummy switches, but they reinforce the the actions and make sure that he's gone through everything, because if the switches aren't all in the right position, he hasn't been through the checklist. Very, very good practice. So preparation, use time where you've got a low cognitive load to prepare for situations where you're going to have a high cognitive load.
And that's quite creative, isn't it? You sent me that video of the guy. He just made it's just a box with switches on it with lights. That's all it is. Yeah. It looks like it would be connected to a fancy computer or an old-fashioned, I don't know, from the 60s or something like that. But actually using that time when you have time to come up with creative strategies so that you can, when things are tight in a time frame, you are prepared.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a creative one. It's a very good one. There are others. And there's also obviously more formal ways in organizations and in professions for handling that in people's training and so on. But it's something we can all apply to our even our daily lives, I think. This concept of being prepared for decisions, including, and this is the key, really, including being prepared for all eventualities, or at least all eventualities that might, realistically occur and which you would have to react to very quickly.
So in a way, we're talking about contingency plans. And another thing that's related to that, I suppose, might be a sort of a tiered goal. So what I'm thinking of is long distance runners who set a target for the time they want to reach. But as the race is going on, actually, it's a really hot day and they're not feeling so good. So then maybe they've got a middle goal or they've got a low goal. And during the race itself, they think, actually, I'm not going to go for the world record today or my PB today. I'm just going to aim. They might go to their lowest goal might be to finish the race, or their lowest goal might have been at the beginning of the day, show up at the start line, and then they've met that goal. So that maybe their aim is to just get a bit further. So there's something to do with, as you're going through time, you're adjusting your goals.
Yeah. So once you recognize the time component in decision making, you can bring in this idea of shifting goals as new information or as events unfold. And I think a really important aspect of this, which is very well covered in therapies such as cognitive behavior therapy, is the idea that from the get-go, right at the beginning, when you set your goals, you're aware of the fact that you may want to or needs to change those goals as you go along. So if you're struggling, you can say, okay, I'm going to give myself a break and I'm going to set at least to begin with an easier goal. Or if you're doing incredibly well, you go, well, this is great. I can move on faster than I was expecting. So recognizing that the decision process as it unfolds over time can be quite fluid.
Well, we're sort of out of time for this episode. I do feel there's a lot more to say. So I suspect we may be coming back to this. This might be a two-parter where we continue on about time. Are you up for that?
I'm up for that. I think you're right. We've hardly scratched the surface of time, which is ironic, but also appropriate.
It is. So anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to us. Check out the links in the description and subscribe to the podcast to hear more of what we're doing. And we look forward to joining you next time on the Unlocking Behaviour Change podcast.